The fluorescent lights of the Hollywood studio conference room hummed overhead as Ava Johnson finished her pitch. Her latest screenplay, Invisible Voices, told the story of artists fighting for recognition in an industry built to exclude them. The irony wasn't lost on her as she watched Rick Thompson, executive producer and gatekeeper of dreams, scroll through his phone with practiced indifference. "It's interesting," Rick said finally, the word dripping with condescension. "But is there an audience for this kind of specific story?" His emphasis on specific carried the weight of countless rejected pitches, of doors closed on diverse voices. Ava had heard variations of this response throughout her decade in Hollywood. After graduating top of her class from USC Film School, she'd worked her way up from production assistant to director, each step harder than the last. Her short films had won festivals. Her episodes of popular TV shows had drawn critical praise, yet somehow she remained unproven for bigger opportunities. Later that evening, in the quiet of her apartment, Ava reviewed her pitch with her best friend and fellow filmmaker Lisa Chun. The walls were covered with storyboards and inspiration photos, visual evidence of the stories burning to be told. He didn't even look at the market research. Ava sighed, spreading out the documents she'd prepared. Studies showing diverse films outperforming traditional narratives, audience demographics shifting. Lisa, who'd faced her own battles as an Asian American director, nodded knowingly. They don't want data. They want comfort. Their comfort. The truth hung between them. Talent wasn't enough. Not when the gatekeepers saw their experiences as niche, their voices as too political, their very presence as a disruption to the status quo. A notification pinged on Ava's phone. Another successful film announced with an all-white creative team. Below it, comments praising its universal appeal and timeless themes. "You know what's funny?" Ava said, anger finally breaking through her professional veneer. "Thompson's latest blockbuster bombed. $300 million budget, generic plot, zero innovation. But he'll get another chance. He always does." Lisa pulled out her laptop, opening a folder of rejected pitches from other minority filmmakers. "We're not alone. Everyone has these stories. Maybe that's our angle, not just telling our story but collecting all of them, making the pattern undeniable." The idea sparked something in Ava. She thought about all the talented creators she knew, marginalized voices pushed to the industry's edges, their brilliance dimmed by systematic exclusion. "What if we created our own platform?" Ava proposed. Energy building. Not just pitching to people like Thompson, but building something they can't ignore. As they brainstormed into the night, the outline of a plan emerged. They would organize an event, part film showcase, part industry expose. Gather other rejected filmmakers, document their experiences, create a collective voice too powerful to dismiss. Meanwhile, across town in his Bel Air mansion, Rick Thompson reviewed quarterly reports. Declining box office numbers, shifting audience preferences. His assistant had compiled data on emerging markets, but he dismissed it. He'd succeeded by following his instincts, by knowing what worked. Change meant risk, and risk meant potential failure. The irony that his fear of failure was leading him straight toward it escaped him entirely. The basement of Lisa's indie production company became their war room. What started as Ava and Lisa's initiative grew into a movement. Every week brought new allies, directors, writers, actors, all sharing stories of doors closed because their visions didn't fit the traditional market. Maria Gonzalez, an acclaimed documentary filmmaker, brought footage of studio meetings where executives praised her work while suggesting she make it less Hispanic. James Washington, whose horror scripts explored racial trauma, shared rejection letters calling his work too political for mainstream audiences. They called themselves the Invisible Collective, creators whose stories had been deemed unmarketable by Hollywood's gatekeepers. Each meeting revealed new patterns of exclusion, but also new possibilities for resistance. "We've been playing their game," Ava realized during one session, "trying to fit our stories into their boxes, making ourselves smaller to seem less threatening." The group began documenting everything. Every discriminatory comment masked as constructive criticism, every diversity initiative that led nowhere, every promise of change that maintained the status quo. They collected data, testimonies, and evidence of systemic barriers. Meanwhile, Rick Thompson's world was showing cracks. His latest projects underperformed, while films from diverse creators gained audience share. During executive meetings, younger board members pushed for change, citing shifting demographics and social media backlash. "The landscape is changing," his assistant warned, presenting reports on viral campaigns demanding representation. "We need to adapt." But Rick saw adaptation as surrender. He'd built his career on instinct, on knowing what audiences wanted before they did. The thought that he might be wrong, that his instincts might be prejudices in disguise, threatened everything he believed about himself. The Invisible Collective's first public event was a guerrilla film festival in an abandoned warehouse. They screened rejected projects, shared development horror stories, and showcased the talent Hollywood was missing. The energy was electric, raw, revolutionary. Social media amplified their message. #HollywoodSoExclusive trended as more creators shared their experiences. Industry publications couldn't ignore the conversation anymore. Even Rick's own employees began questioning their company's practices. The movement gained unexpected allies. Junior executives, tired of pushing the same safe formulas, leaked internal emails showing systematic discrimination. Film school students organized protests. Audiences demanded better representation, backing their words with viewing choices. Ava found herself at the movement's center, her original rejection transforming into a catalyst for industry-wide change. The very qualities that made her unmarketable, her authenticity, her unwillingness to compromise her vision, became her greatest strengths. Lisa developed an online platform where marginalized creators could share resources and support each other's projects. What began as mutual aid became a powerful network, bypassing traditional gatekeepers entirely. The collective strength came from its diversity, each member bringing unique perspectives and skills. When mainstream media tried to dismiss them, they created their own channels. When traditional funding dried up, they found alternative sources. Rick watched from his office as the movement grew. His instinct was to fight back, to defend the system that had served him so well. But doubt crept in. Was he protecting art, or just his own power? Was his resistance about quality or fear? The annual Hollywood Producers Summit became ground zero for confrontation. Ava and the Invisible Collective orchestrated their biggest move yet, a multimedia presentation exposing decades of systemic discrimination in the industry. They rented billboard space around the venue, displaying statistics on representation gaps. Projected onto the building's facade were quotes from rejection letters, each revealing the coded language used to maintain exclusion. Inside, collective members infiltrated every panel and Q&A session, challenging the old narratives. Rick Thompson sat through it all, watching his world shift. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from board members, investors, and media outlets. The carefully maintained facade of merit-based decision-making was crumbling. During the summit's main panel, Ava took the stage. Her presentation wasn't angry or accusatory. It was devastatingly precise. She showed how diverse projects consistently outperformed expectations when given proper support. How audiences hungered for authentic stories. How exclusion wasn't just morally wrong, but bad business. "We're not asking for charity," she concluded, looking directly at Rick. "We're offering you the future. The question is, are you brave enough to accept it?" The room erupted in applause. Even some of Rick's closest allies shifted uncomfortably, recognizing themselves in the patterns she'd exposed. Decades of excuses about market realities and audience preferences dissolved under the weight of evidence. Backstage, Rick confronted Ava. Their conversation, recorded by multiple phones, would later go viral. "You're destroying everything we've built," he accused. "No," Ava replied calmly. "We're building something better. Something that includes everyone's stories, not just the ones that make you comfortable." The video spread rapidly. The powerful producer, face red with anger, contrasted with the composed director calmly dismantling his arguments. Each attempt to defend the status quo only highlighted its flaws. The summit became a turning point. Major studios, fearing public backlash and recognizing changing market forces, began announcing diversity initiatives with real funding and accountability. Young executives, emboldened by the movement, pushed for structural changes. Rick found himself increasingly isolated. His tried-and-true defenses, blaming market forces, questioning commercial viability, rang hollow against hard data and shifting audience demands. His own company's board began questioning his leadership. The Invisible Collective's influence grew beyond exposing problems. They began offering solutions. They developed mentorship programs, created funding networks, and established new distribution channels. Their success proved that diversity wasn't just about social justice. It was about unleashing untapped creative potential. Media coverage shifted from treating them as activists to recognizing them as industry innovators. Their methods were studied in film schools, their impact acknowledged by industry veterans. What began as resistance became revolution, then evolution. 5 years after the summit, Hollywood's landscape had transformed. The Invisible Collective had evolved into a major production company, with Ava as CEO and Lisa heading content development. Their success inspired similar movements worldwide, creating a global network of inclusive storytelling. Rick Thompson's journey became a case study in adaptation. After initially fighting change, he underwent a public awakening. His testimony before an industry diversity commission, acknowledging his role in maintaining exclusionary practices, marked a turning point for many old-guard producers. "I confused tradition with truth," he admitted. "I thought I was protecting quality, but I was really protecting privilege." The company he'd once led now operated under new leadership, with mandatory inclusion standards and transparent decision-making processes. Projects were evaluated on innovation and authenticity rather than conformity to old formulas. Ava's original rejected script, Invisible Voices, finally went into production, but with a new ending reflecting their success. The film became a critical and commercial triumph, proving definitively that authentic stories could achieve universal appeal. More importantly, the industry's pipeline changed. Film schools reported record diversity in enrollment. Writers' rooms and directors' chairs increasingly reflected global audiences. The term mainstream expanded to include previously marginalized perspectives. The Invisible Collective established a foundation supporting emerging creators from underrepresented backgrounds. Their annual festival became a major industry event, known for launching innovative new voices and perspectives. Lisa's online platform evolved into an industry-standard resource, connecting creators with funding, distribution, and collaboration opportunities. Traditional gatekeepers adapted or became irrelevant as new paths to audience engagement emerged. The movement's impact extended beyond film into television, streaming, and digital media. Stories once deemed too specific or unmarketable found eager audiences, proving that authenticity and commercial success weren't mutually exclusive. Rick, in his last public appearance before retirement, shared a stage with Ava at a film school graduation. Their conversation about industry transformation became a viral moment of reconciliation and progress. "The greatest films," Ava told the graduates, "come from people brave enough to tell their truth and leaders brave enough to listen." The industry they'd helped create wasn't perfect, but it was evolving. Each new voice added depth to the cultural conversation. Each authentic story expanded the possibilities for all storytellers. The movement they'd started continued growing, ensuring that future generations of creators would find doors open rather than closed, their voices heard rather than silenced. Hollywood's new era had begun.